Hello.
Yo. All right. How y'all doing tonight? First of all, thank you for coming out. Storyboard it's about story. And I think story is how we share information. It's how we learn. My whole life has been about stories. I've always been in love with movies. And just by chance and hard work, I ended up in film and television. What I was doing before that, definitely I wasn't on this path. But somehow I was able to turn and learn, how to do what I do now. So I'm just ready to do this. I'm ready to tell stories. And who better than Jason? Me and Jason known each other for a long time. When you say maybe 10, 12 years. Yeah.
I think it's probably more than that.
Probably more than that. Well, I know Jason pre-gray hair. I didn't have no gray hair when I met Jay. But I think Jason's a visionary. I think he's a leader. He's definitely not the conventional entertainment CEO that you probably meet. A lot of people are kind of into the spotlight, into the glam. But I think Jason is just, he's really ahead of the curve, ahead of the cusp. He's somebody that's an innovator. He's always thinking. The last time I actually had a long conversation with Jason was a couple nights ago. But before that, he invited me by his house and said he just wanted to share some ideas with me. And people don't normally do that, especially, somebody as accomplished as Jason. So when you meet him, you're not really expecting the type of person that he is, but when he opens up to you, Jason is a real dude, man. And I just want to salute you while we're here. You know how
I appreciate that.
Give people this roses now.
I appreciate
it. Give it up.
Thank you, of course, for those great, kind words, my friend Tori.
True words, brother.
Yeah.
True words. So, you ready to get into this?
Let's do it.
All right. So, Jason, everybody knows who you are at this point. So tell us where you're from. Where did it begin?
Originally, I'm from Brooklyn, New York. Grew up between Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Montclair, New Jersey, So I think no matter what, my journey began for me as a kid, just living in New York. Hip hop, the culture was those were the pivotal years, like the great years just of the culture being so young and so pure for real, So you had people just all around my neighborhoods where I grew up at. You just saw it, living in the Bronx, like I lived in Parkchester, and there was an area that you had like a ton of rappers like D Nice and Joski Love and Sweet T and Craig G. You just had like a bunch of rappers that lived in the area, so it was other rappers that came to visit these guys on top of that, So for me, it was always like, it was just always around me, When I moved to New Jersey, I moved to a town called Montclair, New Jersey, and when in homeroom, I befriended a guy by the name of Yafeu Fula, and we became friends and just naturally just friends, right? We're in homeroom. I'm a Jeter, he's Fula, so you know how the homerooms go. Like, so you're in homeroom together, and one day he says, yo, my brother, his name is Tupac, and I'm like, who's that? I'm a hip hop dude, I'm like, who's that? Never heard of him, but Tupac ended up being his quote unquote brother, and his kid, he's, became Gaddafi of the Outlaws, Once he started rapping, that's what he changed his name to. But in this town, it was like Hussein Fatal, Young Noble, like dudes from the Outlaws that lived there, and I was, just once again a fan of music coming from New York and really starting to get older, and I was always like an entrepreneur though, so I was always outside of music, I was always hustling, trying to figure out how to make some extra money and, buy whatever I wanted to buy for myself. So I started selling mixtapes. I started making mixtapes and selling mixtapes. I never wanted to be an artist because when I saw Crush Groove, the movie at a young age, like I related to Russell Simmons, Russell Simmons got the girl. Like, so, I mean, I just related to Russell Simmons more so than the artist. So I never tried to rap. So it was always funny because I would always be in a room with music, with artists, with producers, and I just always considered myself like an A&R manager. Like, you know, like, and people used to bug out like, yo, what are you doing here? Like, you don't even rap. Like, but I'm like, I got the tapes. Don't worry about it. You know, like, so I started selling mixtapes. You know, started making my own mixtapes when I was in high school by staying up and listening to Stretch Armstrong and Bobbito, and you know, I caught like those great moments within the culture, like the first Wu-Tang on, you know what I'm saying, like the first Nas, like, you know, like you remember that, you know,
Yeah,
like having the whole Illmatic album way before the album came out, you know what I'm saying?
All that. Ready to Die too.
Yeah, all of that. So you know, that era in the '90s, it was just a beautiful time, and I was a fan, and I was kind of just growing into just finding my place, you know, in the culture.
So, how did you see yourself? I know you said when you saw Crush Groove, you wanted to be Russell. As you started to understand, or did you understand anything about the business at that time?
Well, I studied, you know, so I won't say that I understood the business, but I was reading credits, you know, so I was like digesting as much information as I could from being outside. Obviously, this is like pre-internet and all of this stuff, right? So it wasn't like you could really, it wasn't like you knew what the inside of a record label looked like, right? Yeah. You know, so I just read as much information, hung out like at the record store, and, you know, and got introduced to Billboard magazine, and just started kind of just understanding the credits and things of that nature. And by the time I got to 12th grade, I interned at Arista Records, you know, so that was my first real, true walk into, you know, a record company, into the business side of the of music, you know, and really just to understand if this was something that I really wanted to do or not, you know.
So your Arista stint, was that the Bad Boy era?
Yeah, Arista at the time, I interned for a guy named Jeff Burrows, who was like the head of marketing. Excuse me, and Bad Boy was there during this time. This Bad Boy was popping. LaFace was there. LaFace was like the biggest, you know, at that time. And Rowdy Records was also there as well, from Dallas, Austin.
So what was, in terms of impact, I would imagine that Bad Boy was larger, but who really kept the lights on at Arista at that time? I
mean, Bad Boy was, you know, we were in New York, so Bad Boy was like on fire, you know, but LaFace Records economically was like far bigger, you know.
Why is that?
They just had bigger artists. They had TLC, they had Tony Braxton, they had like a few different artists, versus Bad Boy at that time had like 3-4 acts for real, you know. And, you know, rap versus R&B during that time, R&B, if it was a hit, you were doing like 7 million albums, versus rap, if it was a hit, you're doing 2-3 million albums, you know. So I mean, it was just like the genre, the culture wasn't as big as it is now, clearly, you know. So the numbers were different.
So this is 12th grade. So were you preparing to go to school, and, you know? Yeah,
so 12th grade, I was preparing to go to school. I went to Hampton University in Virginia. I went there for like a year, you know, but I had already, for me, it was like I already knew what I wanted to do, you know. So I went to school just on the premises of this is what I'm supposed to do, you know, but just going there, like, you know, my heart wasn't really in it because like something else was calling me, right, you know, yeah.
Purpose was calling you. So Arista, did you leave Arista? Because I know that wasn't your last record label job.
No. That was just internship. So that was like a thing where it's over with. Now I'm going to school.
Right.
And now what? You know. Okay. So as I'm in school, I'm knowing what's going on, knowing what I'm missing out on, right? Because there was people that I interned with that didn't go to school, and they, you know, 3 months later, 6 months later, they got a job. You know what I'm saying? And I'm at school like, damn, we getting paid right now. I could be at the Fat Boy party. I could be, you know, like, so for me, it was just that kind of burning desire to get back to it.
So, so you leave school.
So after the school year, I didn't go back to school.
You didn't. You just didn't go back.
I didn't leave. I just didn't go back.
Just didn't return. It's funny. Your mom could laugh at this now.
I mean, leaving is like the guy who's, we've all seen people who just leave, and what happened to such and such, like in the middle of the year or something, like, so that's why I say it like that.
So where did that carry you from that point?
So I left school, excuse me, I left school, ended up coming to Atlanta, ended up bouncing back and forth between Atlanta and New York, trying to chase my dreams, right? One of my childhood friends had got a record deal at Relativity Records, so I wanted to be around it.
Who was that friend?
Hussein Fatal from the Outlaws,
Okay, Hussein Fatal from the Outlaws.
Yeah, rest in peace, yeah.
Rest in peace.
So he had got a deal at Relativity Records, and I don't know if you guys know what Relativity Records was, but that was like hip-hop, like a real hip-hop label, like during this era they had.
It was like Loud.
It turned into Loud. Yeah. Like what?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It turned into Loud when it was bought. Right. But during that era, they had 3-6 Mafia. They had Bone Thugs and Harmony. They had Fat Joe. They had like a ton of artists, man. Right. Alcoholics. Like it was like all hip hop rap label for real. So like that energy was just amazing. Like their office was on John Street, a few floors down, small building, a few floors down in the building, you had a young Rockefeller Records that was like bubbling at that time. This was like Reasonable Doubt era. So when Jay-Z and them, when they talk about the 300 Benz, the E300 that they rapped, like, that would be downstairs in front of the building. So this was just like the epicenter at the time of like everything that was going on, Yeah.
So, okay, so you're in Atlanta. But you haven't settled in Atlanta at this point.
Well, at this time, I'm in New York, so I'm kind of just going back and forth, and eventually I just came back to Atlanta and said, okay, let me just stay in Atlanta, Right. Yeah.
Did you have a plan?
Yeah. When I came back to Atlanta, I wanted to, like I said, like The Face, those, Rowdy, So Def, those were the labels during that time, So when I came back to Atlanta, I knew that, okay, like I got to find my niche, my position, and I didn't really want to go work at one of those labels because I just didn't feel like I fit in at any of those labels, So I started working at Patchwork Studios. So I started working there. During the daytime, I worked college radio. I worked records at college radio, and at nighttime, I worked at the studio downstairs. So it was like at a house. Upstairs was independent record label, downstairs was recording studio. So literally, like, I would work upstairs, and then I leave, and then I come back and work nights, But yeah, I worked.
That was a crazy time. That was almost a transformative time in Atlanta. But Patchwork was like the center of a lot of action. So what kind of relationships came out of that? Like, who did you run into? Who did you meet?
So that was the dope part about just being there. It was like, to me, I realized that, excuse me, working in the studio, you got to meet everyone within the business, right? You got to meet artists, producers, managers, label executives, right? And I'm standing like right in the middle as like the traffic guard, just opening up the door. You know what I'm saying? Like, just opening up the door, but no matter what, I'm the guy that's opening up the door. You know what I'm saying? You don't get in unless I open up the door, right? So, I mean, that's one of the opportunities or scenarios that really, truly helped me meet people on a ground level, So from artists, managers, executives to, a lot of people that were like peers at that time with me trying to get on, right? And they've risen, at this point, and we have that history, and that rapport from knowing each other from the beginning, So, I mean, it was a ton of people that I met, and I think that for me coming to Atlanta, I didn't know anybody. So that's truly how I met, like, mostly everybody, like, on day one in Atlanta, through that route. And while I was there, I I really kind of I met Toomp. I met DJ Toomp. You know, he was one of the guys I met. Before that, I kind of connected with like Raekwon and different people like that, and got beats on their projects. But when I met Toomp, I thought DJ Toomp was like an incredible producer, and I felt like he just wasn't really getting like the respect or credit that he should have gotten, that he deserved. So I remember like just saying to him like, yo, I think that we should find an artist for you to really display your music on, because at this time in Atlanta, there was a company called Noontime, and Noontime was like, it was just like a few little cliques like in Atlanta, and if you weren't a part of one of these few little cliques, it wasn't really happening. You know, this is obviously pre-technology, right? Like pre like, this is pre a lot, like pre-Pro Tools. Yeah, this is pre-Pro Tools, like for real. So, you know, you had to make a record, it was like an investment. You know, you really had to know someone, somebody sponsoring you, paying for you, like there was a big deal for you to go in the studio and make a record, you know. So, like I said, Toomp, I just felt like he was dope, and we started looking for an artist to work with together. You know, we met a couple guys, and we eventually met a young T.I., you know, and he was like 18 years old at the time. Yeah.
What was your first thoughts of him when you met T.I.?
When I first met Tip, it was interesting because I met him at a barbershop. So his cousin had a barbershop, and Tip was like working in the barbershop, like cutting hair, you know. And me and Toomp went to the barbershop to meet him, and during this time, Outkast was like everything for Atlanta, right? Like, so every rapper that was in Atlanta damn near looked like a descendant of Outkast, right? Like they all, like you had dreads, you had gold teeth, you had it was like an extra Southern thing presentation that they had for real, you know? So it was like either you were like inspired by Outkast or you were like bass music inspired, right? You know what I'm saying? Like that's how like Atlanta was musically during that time, you know? So when I get to the barbershop, we just really in there talking. We were in there talking for a while, and eventually maybe like an hour, 2 hours later, I'm like, yo, so where's the artist at? You know? And he's like, oh, I'm the artist. You know, so that just kind of gives you an example of his presentation at this moment, you know, at this time within hip-hop, like, still to this day, no tattoos, you know, like, he didn't have no gold teeth, he, you know, had on a polo shirt, like, you know, so he just didn't really come across like an artist for me, you know. But for me, when he said I'm the rapper, it was like, okay, we could work, you know, just being that we had already connected for an hour, 2 hours, just talking, right, just organically, and it was just like, okay, like, this works, you know. So 3 days later, we did a demo tape, you know.
What do you remember about that demo? Where'd you record that at, the demo tape?
It was a guy, I'm sure this guy's still around. That's the funny part. There's a guy named B Hood. He had a studio on Washington Road, like right off the highway, right off of 285. I don't know if
there right now.
I'm sure B Hood, for real. B Hood, he had a nice little hole in the wall studio, but he was there like, I might have ran across him like 10 years ago. He was still there, you know. But you know, we went to his spot, and it was like cheap studio. Like, even though I worked at Patchwork, I couldn't afford to like go to Patchwork, right? So we went to B Hood's studio and recorded 4 songs, you know, and that was the demo tape.
So where'd you shop it? I mean, was there anybody in particular that you took it to that shot it down, or was they feeling it? What?
Yo, yeah, I mean, like, for me, a lot of people, you know, didn't really hear it necessarily, right? You know, Patchwork was right there. I worked at Patchwork. They had a record label. I went, like, to my job, right, you know, and played it, and it was like, all right, whatever. Kasim Reed, at the time, he was a lawyer, obviously not a mayor, you know, and I had a relationship with him, and it was just so funny. We still laugh about this to this day, because he like told me like how he felt like I should do it. You know, I had a cassette tape, and for me, I was like, I got heat on this tape, you know, like, and he's like, no, your presentation is all wrong. You need to have a folder with a glossy picture and the CD in the case, and you know, like this your bio, this should be printed out. This is how your presentation should be. So you got to think like, you know, even for him, he's not old, but he's not really of the hip hop culture all the way, right? You know, like not to say he's not of it, but not all the way. You know,
want to take his advice?
huh?
You didn't really want his advice.
I mean, no, like our approach was different, you know. And at the time, like the act that he showed me all of these acts that was nice and you know, presented themselves right. But you know, for me, that don't matter, you know. Like, all right, you don't get it, thanks. Like next. Right.
Who eventually got it?
Well, eventually, Big Reese from Parental Advisory was the one who got it for real. Big Reese, I had a relationship with Reese, still have a relationship with him to this day. And they would always record at the studio. So I knew he was there, you know. So I called the studio up one night, called Patchwork up. They were working, and he was like, yo, bring him. Tell him I got this artist. He's like, yo, bring him by. So we walk up, we come to the studio, and literally Tom was like, what's up? Just get in the booth, just rap. Like, I don't want to hear nothing, just rap, you know. So he got a beat on, Tip go in the booth, rap, and he's like, oh shit, okay. Like, and then I still had songs now. You know, so now we play the songs that we had in the demo, and KP was in Parental Advisory. He was the DJ, and he was an A&R at LaFace Records, you know. So he wasn't there at that time. So maybe like 2 days later, KP calls me and says, yo, I want to sign him to LaFace. You know?
Okay. So I think everybody who knows Tip's career, some know Tip's work, but they don't really know you were kind of part of the brain trust that grew it to what it was.
Sure.
We know that the stint at LaFace didn't go right. It didn't go well, rather. And you end up getting off the label. Why did you want to leave? Why did you want to get off? Because I don't think I ever knew that story.
Got you. So during this time, once again, the business is just totally different. You know, everything in the world is different. So during this time, first album came out October 2001. First week, it did like 12,000 albums, you know, which during this time, everybody's selling records. Like, anybody could sell records, right? 12, like, 12,000 was terrible. Like, but, you know, it was so much politics that were really kind of going on for real, you know. LaFace got bought by Arista. L.A. Reid ends up going to Arista, you know, and during that transition, KP, who was our A&R, ends up leaving and going somewhere else, you know, so we're just kind of in the space to fend for ourselves, you know, so really they just kind of threw the project out, you know. We didn't feel like there was really like a setup for real, you know. So for the label, it was all numbers, you know, at this time. You guys did X amount of albums, period, you know. But for us, we were doing shows like crazy, like within the South, you know. So there was records that people were really just showing like, hey, you know what, we like the body of work, you know, and it just needed time to resonate a little bit, you know. So for us, we were going back to the label like, yo, let's shoot a video. We want to shoot a video for Dope Boys. It's a record called Dope Boys in the Trap. And they didn't get it, right? They're like, nah, let's go do another album, you know. So we're like, all right, you know what? We're just going to leave and we'll be back, you know. So we left and kept working, come back up 2 months later, same conversation. We want to get off, you know, we want to shoot a video for Dope Boys. Nah, go back. The album actually got back on the Billboard, you know. But at the time, the thought was everything for hip-hop happens predominantly in the first week. You only did 12,000 your first week, so forget about the rest of it. You know, it's dead. It's over with. And we just didn't like that because we saw what was happening and we saw how we were touching people while we were kind of like going through these chitlin markets, chitlin circuits, just really building our foundation. And we just said, hey, you know what? Well, let's just get off the label. Because at this point, like, we're working, building a fan base, we're making money, you know, so we started having our own ideas. And you got to remember, this is like the era that, like, once again, Rockefeller's like popping right now. No Limit, Master P, you know, so you see like all of these movements and you see how other people are doing it. So it just kind of gives you confidence, right? That like, hey, shit, if we making money doing shows and we doing 3-4 shows a week, like our business is not what you think it is, you know. So we eventually got a release from the label.
So after making that separation from the label, you guys hit the street hard. It was In the Streets, Volume 1. That was a big thing. What made, because that wasn't typical of Southern artists. I mean, people in New York, you know, East Coast artists, maybe even some West Coast artists was putting out mixtapes, but that wasn't a thing in the South like that.
I don't really think no artist, like even on the West Coast, I don't think was putting out mixtapes like that way, right? Let's be honest. Like I think 50 Cent probably really was like the first one that I know about. Somebody else may have something to debate here, but 50 Cent was like the first artist that I saw that was literally like, this is my album / mixtape, you know, and like he was doing it during that time. So for me, you know, I was abreast of what was going on back home, and I already had a mixtape kind of background. So I'm like, yo, we can't afford to buy beats and produce an official album. So let's create a mixtape, you know. So we created a mixtape, and being that we were already doing shows all around, I would go into the markets and meet the, you know, the mom and pop record store owners. So I pretty much had like a little Rolodex of information. So it's like, all right, let's do a mixtape, and then I just started doubling back and selling the mixtapes to the independent stores, you know. So we do like CODs every Tuesday and Thursday, and you know, sell these mixtapes and put them in the streets. And of course, we did a Volume 1, Volume 2. By the time we got to Volume 3, which was probably like a year and a half span. Like by the time we got to that point, like everybody knew about it. You know, like Volume 3, Puffy hosted Volume 3. Like he did the intro, right? Like, you know, so of course it's Atlanta. So you know how Atlanta is, like no matter what, if somebody comes and they the hot artist from wherever and they come to the club and it's like this to this day, right? You run into that local artist that you never heard of before. You're like, how is he hotter than me right now in Atlanta, you know? So it's one of those kind of scenarios, and it travels, right? So that's kind of what got the whole interest, I'll say, you know, of labels at that point.
Y'all really hit the chitlin circuit though. You didn't really do Atlanta as much back then.
No. Yeah. We didn't do Atlanta. Atlanta's cool, but you know, it's so much money in these other markets. So we knew that, yo, Atlanta's home, so we're gonna always make it back to Atlanta. So for us, between like the Carolinas, Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, parts of Mississippi, Louisiana, parts of Texas, you know, I'll say even up as far up as to like Virginia, you know, like actually then the Midwest as well, like Detroit too, you know, and Miami as well. Florida's crazy, you know, but yeah, we just stayed on the move and just stayed, you know, building.
Tip was catching some beef at that time too. Flip. I'm trying to.
If you fast forwarded though, Flip was like, this wasn't even Flip yet. Like, but yeah, Flip that came about though, right?
Yeah, it was,
yeah.
Yeah, it was in the.
That came about.
That area.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But was that was prior to Atlantic? That was after Atlantic. The Flip situation.
That was in the beginning of Atlantic. That was
very
in like
beginning.
The very beginning of Atlantic. Yeah.
How did y'all end up over there?
Atlantic?
Yeah. Did they come for you? Or?
Yeah. So we had like, you know, what every artist wants, right? When you're in music or whatever you're doing, you want options, you know. So at this time we had like every option for the most part, right? If there's 10 labels, we probably had like 8 labels trying to sign us, right, during this time. And Atlantic Records really didn't have anybody. You know, they didn't have many people outside. They had Fat Joe, they had Lil Kim, they had Nappy Roots. And I remember, like, I don't know if anybody remembers, but Nappy Roots, they had like one album, right? Maybe a couple more albums, but one album that was really their hit album, you know.
Shout out to them.
And yeah, shout out to Nappy Roots. You know, but at this time, they shot like 4 videos on this one album, you know. And during this time, that was like a rarity. Like, wow, they shot 4 videos. You know, like you had to be like DMX or like, you know what I'm saying? You had to be like a major artist to shoot 4 videos at this time. So to me, I'm like, man, if they shot 4 videos for these bums, now let me stop. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. But, you know, it's like as a solo artist, you just, you know, I mean, not as a solo artist, no matter what, this is the mentality, right? When you're doing what you're doing, you think you got the dopest thing in the world, period, you know? And that's what it takes to get it done, you know? So this is literally my thought process, right? Like, yo, if you shot 4 videos on them, you're going to love what I got, you know? So I really kind of learned it's not really always about who wants you, but sometimes it's more so about who needs you, you know? So for me, that was my thought process. Like, you know, we had Def Jam, we had Bad Boy, we had everybody that wanted to sign us, but when you went to Def Jam, it was like, man, y'all got a lot of artists over here. Like, they had so many artists at that time. It was crowded. When we went to Atlantic, they still had, like, linoleum on their walls. Like, no lie, like, the walls, like, the office was just, like, old, you know? And for me, they were the ones that were giving us the label deal scenario that we really wanted. You know, so that was a great check, and it was a lot of just runway. It was a lot of space, right? You know, you go into a building, if you got to do music, if you have an artist, you manage an artist, you always got to wonder, like, okay, what's your calendar like? You know, when you walk into an office and you're about to do a deal, like, what's the calendar? Because, like, how am I going to get some attention on your busy calendar? Because no matter what, when you're a new artist, and we had already experienced this, right, at Arista, so we already know what it felt like to be the sucker in the building, you know? So we had got our weight up a little bit, but no matter what, you know, you got to look at the calendar and see what your competition is, because you have world competition, but you also have internal competition to get attention from, you know, the powers that be.
Right. So you did a joint venture.
Yeah, we did a joint venture label deal. Yep.
But I don't think it wasn't common. They weren't giving joint ventures to everybody.
Nah, not during this time. It totally wasn't common, you know. No, it wasn't common, but we had like so much energy in the streets, and I started working the record 24s as well. So 24s came from the Volume 3 in the Streets mixtape, you know. Started working that myself at radio, so it was a thing where it's like we had like a record that was in, you know, X amount of markets, getting X amount of spins, and we had X amount of energy in the streets that, you know, business is supply and demand.
Right.
Yeah.
But, so 24s was on Volume 3. It was already impacting in a way. But when that video came, I remember the energy around that video. Was it a trajectory? Did it just kind of change what you was doing at the time?
I mean, you know, it's funny because literally, like, the way that we did that deal, like, we had the album Trap Music, we had recorded the whole album except for 2 songs before we did the deal, you know? So literally, like, when we sat down and had our meeting, everything was laid out. Like, yo, this is our record, which is already at radio. It's already, like, on fire. You know what I'm saying? Like, we already got spins in these markets in Atlanta. Everybody, it is what it is, you know? But we knew, like, we want to do this next, A, B, C. So we had the whole layout. So literally, it was like, if we're going to do this deal, y'all going to have to give us the money right now because we're shooting a video next week. So literally, that's how it happened. Like, we were in New York. Like, we're going to sit here right now. Y'all go ahead and cut us our check. They gave us the check that night. Like, we stayed in this, we get dinner. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and they gave us the check that night and went back to Atlanta and Fat Cats. You remember Fat Cats, you know?
Indeed.
Yeah. Gave Rennie that check, you know, and shot a video the next week. So, you know, for us at that point, you know, it was one of those things where for real we had so many people that were in our corners because everyone saw the process and saw us putting in work, like grinding. So, you know, now these people are invested and want to see you win, you know? So that's what was great about that scenario is like, you know, once the video came out, there was so many people that was holding us down from just being independent, quote unquote, you know? So it was like, okay, now let's see what y'all gonna do. You know?
But Tip, he got in some trouble around that time as well, right? During the how did you I mean, I know you kind of had more practice at handling it later on, but
yeah, that was I guess this first real trouble from when I was, you know, started, you know, working with Tip during that time, right? You know, and it's funny because most people don't know about that. Like, you got to be like Atlanta for real to even know about that, you know. But it was interesting, man. It was Tip ended up it was like he would have to he would like spend a night in jail and like get out during the daytime, like work release kind of thing, get out for like a certain amount of hours. And we were recording during that time. That was actually when we were making Urban Legend though. I think that was when we were working on Urban Legend. Yeah, when we were making Urban Legend.
Been released yet.
Yeah, it hadn't been released yet. So we went and got a house. We went and rented out a house. So every day he would come to this house and we would record in his house, and it would be like parties in his house like every other day. Like this is like Atlanta BMF Atlanta, like Big Meech, you know what I'm saying? Like Meech would pull up with like a bus, like to the house. I'm talking about the house would be like Magic City inside his house. It was crazy. Like crazy, like a house and like all the girls in Magic City in the house and the whole floor of the house covered with money. And downstairs in the basement, we had the studio. So we were working in the studio for real, But you know how it is when you have the energy, people want to be around the energy, So we had so much energy. That's what was interesting about Meech is like he just loved music, right? So he just used to I just want to come and be around the energy, and like, so it was a good time,
And not to ask you a bunch of tip questions, but I think it kind of displays who you are as a leader to be able to pivot like that. That's why I asked the question. But he's a superstar at this point, doing part mostly to the work that you put in and him being who he is. But I think everybody here who's a fan or not knows that he's not the kind of guy that you could just really give advice to or just tell what to do or maybe even manage. So how did you, just the kind of guy he is?
Sure.
Like when he makes up his mind, that's what it is.
I mean, to me, we were always, I managed him, but we were, business partners and friends, right? Like we're 3 years apart, so it could be kind of hard, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I mean, like all you could do is give a person your advice. Like, come on, you can't, it ain't my style to beg a person or, to beg anybody or try to convince you too much, like I'm going to tell you what I think and I'm going to show you what I feel, but other than that, let's be honest, it is what it is, everybody's their own man, so yeah.
And during this time, you're on fire. You're on fire. Urban Legend. What was your breakthrough record on Urban Legend?
Urban Legend, I think overall the breakthrough record was probably like Rubber Band Man for real when like more people started recognizing and realizing what was going on, and then after that, Urban Legend, we went into what was the record with Swiss Beats?
Bring 'Em Out.
Bring Them Out. You know what I'm saying? Like at that point, it was just like once you find your groove, you
Right.
start going in. Yeah.
But then came like the tsunami. When you pulled out the greatest heist was King dropping the same week as ATL, which turned him into a superstar. But did it make Grand Hustle a solid label at this point? When did you start signing people at this? You signing people at this point?
Yeah, we were already signing people. So we had a label deal. So we were already signing people. Initially, it was like signing friends, though. So I think at a certain point, you start kind of seeing a little further out and saying, all right, we want to sign not just personal relationships. But yeah, that album, King album, integrated with the rollout of ATL, the movie. I mean, at that point, it's like you got a movie, you got an album, so now you got other opportunities start rolling in, right? From endorsements, tours, and and things of that nature, So, yeah, that's the point that it was like.
Was King actually the soundtrack to ATL?
No.
It was just,
they didn't have a soundtrack. ATL didn't have a soundtrack, so it was like we just kind of like strategically like hijacked that position, just by saying that we're going to take this record and integrate it in the movie, and we're going to get all of the money that the movie has. We're going to be in all of the trailers and all of that, you know. So, you know, we kind of hijacked it and just took the energy of it all, and it was like the non-official soundtrack in a sense. You know?
So back to you as an executive and signing. I remember a conversation you had when he was like, "Yo, Graham." For those that don't know me, that's Jason calls me that, right? A lot of people do.
See, I ain't the only one.
Shit. Yo, Graham, I got this artist, man. He like Carlton Banks, but hood. Dro. But, I mean, I don't know if anybody would have saw that with Dro. So, I mean, just using that same mind from a Tip, being able to see Tip, not for him being an Atlanta artist. You knew he wasn't from anywhere else. But seeing a Dro, I don't think anybody would have saw that immediately. On to Travis Scott. What are you looking for when you see an artist?
I mean, Dro is dope. I don't really even say you can say nobody would see that, honestly. Just being that.
About his music is crazy. I'm talking about the look.
I mean, that's what makes it even better, right? Like, his look is like flagrant.
When you said it to me and you told me a Carlton Banks but hood, I'm like,
I mean, yeah. So I mean, that was, to me, it's like, what is your unique offering, right? Like, no matter what, like, that's kind of like a common denominator. Like, what do you have to offer that's different from the rest of these guys, whoever that is, you know? And with Dro, anybody know Dro was rapping. Like, Dro was rapping, man, like, for real, like, all day long rapping. With Tip, it's always funny, right? Because, like, with Tip, it used to bug me out. From day one for me and him, for me, I'm coming from New York, and I'm coming from people rapping after school and rapping in the hallways and just rapping, right? And everybody just loving to rap. Whereas Tip would never rap. He would only rap when it was time to rap in the booth. He would never rap. You would never know he was a rapper because he was just never even rapping. You're like, you know, whereas Dro was the opposite. Dro's the guy that's going to be over here in the corner just rapping, like, you know. So I think that energy of just knowing how dope Dro was and I mean, personality-wise, you know, the dude is hilarious, like, for real, so funny and comical. And you know, fashion-wise, just like I said, just so flamboyant. Clay Flamingo.
Clay?
Yeah. So, you know, just being so flamboyant, it was like a no-brainer for real, you know? Yeah.
What'd you see in Travis Scott?
Travis was like a young Kanye for real, you know? To me, like, Kanye was like on fire at this time, right? And just meeting Travis, he was somebody that a lot of times artists, when they're young, they kind of sound like their role model in a sense, you know? When I met Tip, he sounded like a baby Pimp C, you know? So it's like people kind of typically sound like someone, and then they have to kind of find their own voice and develop a little bit as they go along. You know, sure, in sports, right? If you play in sports, you're gonna, you know, pace yourself after whatever player and pace your game after that, you know, after that person perhaps. So with Travis, more than anything, he was just super talented and just like raw talent, like being that he really knew what he wanted. You know, like dude was rapping, producing, directing his video, like, you know, he just wanted to touch every aspect of his business, you know, of his art, of his creativity, you know, and that's really, to me, what really like captivated me for real. Just when you walk in the studio, you see an artist, you see someone that's so young, and their confidence is like, I don't care what you got Grammys, whatever, move out of the way. This is what I want to do, you know. So to me, I think that that's always like a good trait. Just in an artist for real, you know, not to be overly arrogant, but just to be very precise on what their vision is, because you think it's hard to sell yourself if you don't know yourself, you know. If you don't know what you want, how you gonna articulate that to somebody else for real, you know? So when somebody knows what they want and are very adamant about it, it just makes your job easier.
Well, since then, label accomplished, Striver's Row, which is dope and still growing. Now you have Tech Cypher. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Tech Cypher, Tech Syndicate, you know. So a few years back, I got interest. I'm an entrepreneur. I got interest in getting in the tech business. We all hear about deals, hear about things, Uber deals or whatever. You know, you hear about these these stories, and you're always like, how do I get in? How can I get in? Damn, only if I could be a part of that, you know? So for me, I just kind of started, I had those feelings, right? So I'm like, let me figure it out. So I kind of organically started meeting people and building relationships and learning the game, how to invest, how to play the game, and just understanding the landscape, the players in the game, and where do I go and things of that nature, you know. So after about 3 years of doing this, just building, you know, the dope thing about, well, I'm gonna say the dope thing, the interesting thing about tech is that we know there's not a lot of black people in tech yet, like that are like on a high level. So obviously that's a con, but the pro in that is when you meet one, they pretty much can introduce you to others that are also on a high level because they all know each other, you know, so it's such a small circuit for real. So I really started meeting like a lot of good people, and like I said, a few years into it, I said, all right, this is how I want to approach the game. I want to invest, but I knew that I had to, you got to make a lot of investments. You know, people will tell a story about, yo, Nas, he, you know, did this or this person did that. But the part that they don't tell is like, yo, they made like 120 investments. And out of the 120 investments, maybe 16 of them worked. You know what I'm saying? But those 16 that worked are going to cover your money for all of the other ones that didn't work, you know? So just understanding that, I said I got to come back and I got to group economics, you know? So I kind of got a bunch of guys in the room that that I felt like got it, you know, that I knew they were already invested in other things like real estate and things of that nature. So we got in the room and we started moving forward.